Every year in autumn, my mom, brother, and I drive 2 hours to a small city. We stay for the weekend and always stay at the same hotel. The woman at the receptionist desk knows us by names, and because of that, we usually get the best rooms. Like most of the city, the hotel is old, made in the late 19th century, yet every room was fitted with a TV and Wi-Fi. The hotel was amazing. If we didn't go to the main part of the city each day, there was still so much to do. The hotel was still a bit away from the city. You wouldn't find it unless you were looking for it. It was behind all the houses, surrounded by paddocks and small grasslands. There was a lake behind the hotel, which had paths so you can walk around outside. There was a pool as well, but when we go, it's too cold to swim. There is a small playground my brother and I used to play on when we were younger. There was even a bike shed to ride bikes, and a games room with a pool table, and a TV that plays the same episode of SpongeBob over and over again. There was always one thing that baffled me though. The curfew our hotel has, there is a sign at the receptionist desk. Every night between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m., no one is allowed to leave their rooms. Younger me just accepted it. After all, who wants to leave their warm, cozy room in the middle of the night into the dark, scary corridors? However, now that I am 17, it makes me question things. Through the years, I have been to many hotels. None of them have the same curfew. Even the front desk was unavailable through the phone. When I asked the receptionist, she just nodded and smiles, repeating the same sign before talking about other things with my mom. My mom has gotten tired of me asking, and I couldn't be bothered this time. This time, we just grabbed the keys to the room and walked down the hallway. All the rooms have heaters, and they are always on. And sometimes I wonder how the hotel pays for the electricity bill for over 200 rooms. We go and get some food, which we order from a pizza place, a 5-minute drive from the hotel. We return home to watch the Tim Burton Batman movie. Afterwards, we all go to bed. There are only 2 rooms, so I have to share one with my brother. He falls asleep quite fast. I, however, spend the entire night shifting in my bed, uncomfortable. For an autumn night, it's rather hot, and I blame it on the thick blankets and the heater still going. I get out of bed and go into the small living room, where the digital clock blares a red 12:20 a.m. I grab my laptop, opening it up. Unfortunately, the Wi-Fi is not connected, and Mom would kill me if she found out I used it before she paid for it. The internet in the hotel was pay by day, and we were only here for 2 nights, so it was no use wasting money on the internet we weren't using. I decided to play a horror game on my laptop. I love horror. Even if it is overused, the game was indie with cheaply rendered jump scares, but a really well-made plot. I played for a while, stopping when I noticed the heater just turned off. I checked the time. It was 1 o'clock. Over time, the room became really cold, and I quickly grabbed my jumper and put it on. I sat in the cold, my arm shaking a bit as I played on, making sure I didn't wake up my mom or my brother. I started hearing footsteps, and I paused the game. The footsteps were coming from outside the room. I slowly closed the lid of my laptop and stood up. The person outside my doorway had stopped moving, and I braced myself for them to try and open the door. Nothing happened. However, the footsteps started again, fading off down the hallway. I was tempted to go to the door to remind the person to go back to their room because it was past curfew, but a little part of me told me that was a bad idea. It was colder now, and I went back to my bed and wrapped myself in the blanket, taking forever to fall asleep. Throughout the day, our family traveled around the old city, going through open shops and buying comics no one has ever heard of. My mind kept going back to the person outside my door, and I started coming up with an elaborate plan to try and see who it was. My mom questioned me multiple times during the day if I was fine, and I just told her I was tired. That night, I stayed up, everyone else going to bed, yet I stayed on my laptop. I played my game, checking the clock every so often. When the heater finally turned off, I slowly closed the lid and stood up, stretching. I grabbed my phone, turning on the camera, and pressed record. I then grabbed my water bottle. It wasn't your typical plastic throwaway one. This one was metal and could easily likely knock someone out with enough force. I had my jumper on, but I still shivered as I made my way to the door. Grabbing the room keys, I slowly opened it. The corridor was dark, and I used the flashlight I brought during the day to illuminate the area. There was nothing. Absolutely no one was in the hallway, and a part of me was disappointed. I gripped the neck of the water bottle tightly and closed the room door quietly. Despite that, the sound of it clicking behind me was loud, making me nervous. I slowly walked down the hallway, using my flashlight towards every corner and any other hallways that branched off of mine. I looked behind me every few seconds, and even occasionally glancing upward. I got to the end of the hallway, looking around the corner. I froze. In front of me was a child, his back towards me. His height suggested he was just a child. He's wearing a gown, and his footsteps sounded like the ones from last night. I quickly hid behind the wall, hoping that the little kid hadn't noticed me. I slowly turned to look around the corner to see the boy had disappeared. I decided that going back was the best idea, seeing enough horror movies to know that lingering any longer was not going to be good for me. I turned back to get to my room and started power walking. It was cold, and I held my bottle close to my chest, over my thundering heart. Suddenly the sounds of footsteps echoed behind me, and I quickly turned around. I almost screamed. The child was behind me, walking slowly. His eyes were black, and his skin was pale white. The most disturbing part was his mouth. It was just a black gaping hole. I started running, counting each of the room numbers leading up to my door. The footsteps behind me grew faster and closer, and when I reached my door, I almost dropped my key. I did not turn around until I closed the door behind me, keeping out of view of the people that looked into the corridor. I heard knocking on the door, and I was nervous my mom or my brother would wake up. I stood at the door for a long time. The knocking was starting to get to me, but I knew opening up the door was a stupid idea. I don't know how long it went for, but once the knocking stopped, I let out a sigh of relief. I looked at the clock and saw the red numbers showing 5 a.m. The heater system came on, and I finally moved away from the door, quickly making my way back to my bed, slipping under the covers. I did not go to sleep. However, the horrific image of the little boy with a gaping hole for a mouth infested in my mind. The next day we left, and for the first time, I was glad to go home. When I was 15, I traveled to Europe with my family. We stayed in Italy, Germany, in a small inn for a few nights. My parents had a double bed on the second floor. My sisters had the double bedroom next to theirs. and I was lucky enough to have a single room all to myself at the far end of the hall. When we went to check into our rooms, as soon as I entered the hallway our rooms were in, I remember almost feeling as though I walked into a wall of bad energy. I just felt so unnerved and uneasy in that hallway, but I passed it off as an overactive imagination. I slept the first night without any issues other than waking up a few times. The next morning at breakfast, one of my sisters mentioned feeling really uncomfortable in the hallway, almost as if the air was crushing. It unnerved me even more that I wasn't the only one who felt weirded out. Plus, she was an adult at that time, so it further disseminated in my head that the wing of the hotel was awfully odd. Later that night, I'm sleeping peacefully when at 2 a.m., I'm woken by something ripping the covers off me and being jerked about 2 feet towards the end of the bed by my ankle. At first, I thought someone had broken into my room because when I turned towards what grabbed me, it was a huge, looming black shape, visible in the darkness, like a man was in my room. I frantically flipped the lights on, only to have there been nothing there. The window was locked from the inside. There was no one inside the closet or the bathroom, and my room was also still locked from the inside. I stayed up the rest of the night, scared, playing Cooking Mom on my DS. The next morning, we were at breakfast, and my sister mentioned that she was still up half the night because she thought she saw a person silhouetted against the wall of the room. But when she turned on the lights, there was no one there. It was just a bizarre and creepy experience. We checked out that day, so I didn't get to experience anything after that. But it still freaks me out to this day.